What's going on, guys? This is Tower number 9 coming to you with another Star Wars Unlimited video. This one is a video that I actually just recorded earlier this morning. Interesting matchup here. I decided that I wanted to try out the new Count Dooku card that was just previewed, and I wasn't sure exactly what deck I would put him in. Ended up being a Tarkin Vigilance deck. And so I made this kind of more late game focused Tarkin Vigilance deck, and I found an opponent to play with, only to find that he was also running Tarkin Vigilance, and we were both using the same generic base. So we have a big mirror here between not only the same leader but the same aspect choices and even the same base. My opponent leads off with Admiral Mahdi, 2-cost 1/1 when destroyed ready unit. I play Admiral Piet, 2-cost 1/4. Each friendly non-leader unit with cost 6 or more gains ambush. I think I've been rather advantaged in that exchange because Mahdi as a 1/1, I can just take him out directly with Piet and have a good trade. My opponent plays the Super Laser Technician, classic ramp card, very strong card in my opinion. I'm gonna just have Piet take out Mahdi in this scenario. I know it's gonna let my opponent ready his Super Laser Technician, but I'm not really so concerned about that. I want to get Mahdi out of the way before my opponent can play a potential strong card in the future that he would be able to use that ready on. Readying this Super Laser Technician, it is getting some value. He is getting that resource developed earlier. He's doing some damage to my Piet. Super Laser Technician, when defeated, you may put this unit into play as a resource and ready it. But I don't really think he has something to spend that other resource on. Maybe he has a TIE fighter. Maybe he has like a surgical droid or something, but overall, without units to use Tarkin's ability on, probably not that good. Indeed, he takes the initiative. I've played General Veers here. 3-cost 3/3 gives other Imperial units +1/+1. My opponent, however, is going to get Tarkin out a turn early. So, looking at my hand, I don't have any ramp cards available in hand. My opponent does have that resource from the Super Laser Technician, so Tarkin could see play this turn. What I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to minimize the impact of my opponent playing Tarkin. So first off, I'm going to play a Cell Block Guard, buffed by General Veers up to a 4/4, actually pretty solid. My opponent still has 3 resources, ends up playing a Homestead Militia. While you control 6 or more resources, this unit gains Sentinel. Quite a solid card. But he does not at this point have those 6 resources, so I used Tarkin to kill Yularen. And the reason that I did that, or I'm sorry, I used Veers to kill Yularen. And the reason that I did that is because if you Tarkin's ability to give experience on attack only works on Imperial units. The Homestead Militia is not Imperial, so by eliminating the Colonel Yularen there, I've made it so that my opponent's Tarkin ability can't fire. And when he deploys Tarkin, I use my leader Tarkin ability to give a experience token to the cell block guard, and he opts not to attack with Tarkin at all, rather than attacking into that cell block guard and taking 5 damage. So even though my opponent got Tarkin out a turn early, it wasn't that impactful. I'm highlighting Count Dooku there. 7-cost 5/4 shielded. When you play this unit, give him a shield. When played, you may defeat a unit with 4 or less remaining HP. One of the few units that's been shown from this game that is from outside the Galactic Civil War era, and a unit that I was excited about playing. I had 2 copies in hand, so I resourced one, but I still have another one ready to go in the future. However, at 7 cost, it's still going to be another 2 turns before I can potentially play that Dooku. My opponent here plays Overwhelming Barrage, one of the best cards in the game, in my opinion. So this card gives his Homestead Militia +2, and then deals damage equal to its power to my units. So he opts to deal 4 damage to the Cell Block Guard, which would not quite kill him, except he has 1 more point of damage left to assign to Veers and eliminate Veers as well. Ends up removing both of those pieces. So +2/+2, then it deals damage equal to its power divided as you choose. Very strong card. My opponent's ground arena is now much stronger than mine. I do want to put some stuff in the ground arena, but before I do that, I'm going to try and sort of delay here using using cards to develop my space arena instead, in the hopes that I'll be able to have a better situation once I deploy. My opponent takes out Piet there with his Tarkin, gives an experience there, and I could play Veers. If I play Veers, he'll just kill him with the Homestead Militia. Um, so I think I might actually end up passing through at this point, just taking the initiative and allowing the Homestead Militia to hit my base. We will see. I think that's right. Yeah, that is what I do. And the other thing is, I don't really want to deploy Tarkin where he'll get hit for 5 damage by that militia. Arguably, what I could have done is I could have played Veers first. Then probably he kills Veers with the militia. Then I deploy Tarkin. But the problem with that approach is I don't actually get to attack with Tarkin unless I want to take 5 damage into the Sentinel. So all it would do is get me a little bit of tempo, and I would lose General Veers from hand. So I also have a pretty good counter available, which is Agent Callus. I have Agent Callus take down the Homestead Militia, 4/4 ambush. When another unique unit is defeated, you may draw a card. Use this ability only once per round. So Agent Callus at 4/4 is able to ambush and take out the 3/4 Homestead Militia without dying himself. My opponent sends his tie to attack my base. I can use Tarkin's ability to give someone an experience at this point if I want, and then I can also... So I give an experience to Callus, and the reason that I chose Callus is because I think I'm likely going to be trading with the tie, and my opponent might want to attack Callus to defeat him with Tarkin, in which case I'll take a little bit more damage. However, I slightly miscalculated this. I don't think I realized that Tarkin was already damaged. So because of this, he goes to 1 life left, which is still going to allow my Tarkin to kill him in 1 hit, but it doesn't... the extra point of damage there isn't very meaningful. So I'm not altogether sure that that was the most efficient way to do it. It might have been better to try to buff my tie twice and get above his tie. But under the circumstances, I don't know. For whatever reason, my opponent didn't have a card to play that turn. I'm not exactly sure what happened. My Tarkin took out his Tarkin, and now my opponent has a life lead, but I have the stronger card advantage. However, the Imperial Assault AT-AT is a big unit there, or I think it's maybe Blizzard Assault AT-AT, which is 9/9, and when it attacks, it can deal any damage that's left over to another target if it kills its first target. So I deploy an AT-ST and buff it by having Tarkin attack the enemy base. So my AT-ST is now a 7/8. The AT-AT can still defeat it, but will be heavily damaged, and I'll be able to take it out with Count Dooku or with the Death Trooper that I have in hand. And if my opponent doesn't attack immediately with the AT-AT, I can play maximum firepower and kill it with 9 combined damage between my AT-ST and Tarkin. So I feel like I have a decent answer here. My opponent decides he'll use it to destroy my AT-ST. So the AT-ST takes 8 damage to kill, which means 1 damage spills through to Tarkin from the AT-AT's ability. The AT-AT takes 7 damage, and that puts me into that position where I can play out a counter. So the Death Trooper I could play and do 2 damage, or I could play Count Dooku, which would kill it directly because of its low life. So I'm going to play Count Dooku. When played, you may defeat a unit with I think it's 3 or 4 or less remaining HP. Count Dooku is also shielded, so when I play him, I get a shield token. So not only have I cleared his unit, I've also put something strong in myself. Unfortunately, Count Dooku immediately gets hit by takedown, defeat a unit with 5 or less remaining HP. Count Dooku only has 4 base HP, so he's defeated through his shield there. That is kind of a vulnerability of his. He's very good against damage-based removal because the shield will soak the first attack, but against things that just straight up destroy you, the shield is no use, and he is indeed defeated. My opponent then deploys Unit Tarkin, which allows him to search his top 5 cards for up to 2 Imperial cards and put them into play. Also gives him a 2/3 body, and ends up getting Colonel Yularen and an Imperial Probe Droid. I'm very happy to see this. I think this was kind of unlucky for my opponent because he wasn't able to hit anything really valuable. He got like two smaller units rather than getting, another AT-AT or, similar really strong larger cards. I'm also approaching my ultimate unit here. I think I've now reached 9 resources, so we're going to see the top of my curve in play, the mighty Relentless. And with the initiative here, I indeed 9 resources. There's Relentless, one of the strongest cards in the game. 8/8. The first event played by each opponent each round loses all abilities. So not only is Relentless a huge powerhouse in the space arena, it also blanks your opponent's ability to counter it in many cases by negating their first event. Often players are not going to have multiple events they can play in a turn. So you get into this situation where if, maybe my opponent has Vanquish in hand, even if he does, he's not going to be able to use it. He plays an AT-AT. I attack the base with Tarkin and give an experience to Relentless. My opponent puts an experience token on his Tarkin unit and is then going to attack my base. I've taken the initiative though, and my opponent might have a mighty AT-AT, but I have a maximum firepower in hand as well as a Vanquish actually. So I have multiple options for defeating that AT-AT. Let's see what happens here. There's maximum firepower. And yep, so I deal damage equal to a friendly pro unit deals damage equal to its power to a unit, and then another friendly pro unit deals damage equal to its power to the same unit. My Relentless is currently a 9/9, so damage equal to its power destroys that AT-AT outright without even needing the bonus damage from the second hit with Tarkin there. My opponent plays out Colonel Yularen, which will heal his base for 1 life, or 1 HP rather. Colonel Yularen, 2 cost, 2/3, and when you play a command unit, including this one, you may heal 1 damage from your base. Pretty strong card. I'm going to play a TIE Advanced now and give some experience over to Tarkin here. I was originally like kind of delaying. I was thinking maybe I'm going to play this Vanquish if he plays another big unit, but the playing Yularen likely means he doesn't have another big unit. There's a chance he's going to play an ATST or something afterwards, or a Gladiator Star Destroyer, but with only um, with only 7 resources only, he says it's not going to be another AT-AT. We see a Consortium Star Viper, I believe. I have Tarkin swing in for 4 damage to the base and granting 2 experience tokens to my Relentless. My opponent plays a Probe Droid, seeing my 2 Death Troopers and Vanquish. I'm going to just go for the base, 10 damage straight to the base. And at this point, the game is almost certainly mine because it's very, very difficult to stop Relentless with 1 action. Conceivably, he could play a Gladiator Star Destroyer, and then with a Gladiator, he would be able to give something a Sentinel in space. He gives Target an experience, and I take the initiative, and with that, the game is basically over now. Because what I can do is, this turn, the resourcing and the card draw, it just doesn't matter. It doesn't do anything because I can just attack and that's game. And this is it's kind of a checkmate type situation that you get into in this game sometimes, where if you have the initiative and you can destroy the enemy base as your first action, you've won the game already. And so you have to be careful. Sometimes you have to take the initiative quite early when you're low on life in order to prevent that sort of scenario from occurring where the opponent can just go for your base and get the win. So ultimately, he did have some removal type cards in hand, but with Relentless meaning you can only play 1 card per turn, 1 event per turn. Or I'm sorry, meaning that the first event is negated. In theory, you could play 3 or whatever, but the first one wouldn't do anything. He wasn't able to remove my Relentless. and it was ultimately able to get the win. Now, some people don't like Relentless, and to their credit, it is very expensive. But if you're in a game that's going to the late game, I think it's legitimately one of the best cards you can have right now, because not only is it a huge problem that your opponent needs to answer, its ability negating the first event means that most of the answers that they might want to use against it are not going to work unless they have some other event to play with it. And right now, most decks are not running that many events. So in principle, you could play like a repair or something to use Relentless's ability and then play your Vanquish to kill it. But a lot of decks are not running the small events like repair, so it ends up often being a situation where they basically can't remove it with events, have to fight it directly, and it just has better stats than anything else in the space arena at this time. My opponent plays a TIE fighter this game. We're doing a rematch. So the TIE fighter, the TIE LN plus buff from Tarkin is one of the best openings for a Tarkin build, in my opinion. And that's what my opponent had. I had Admiral Piet, who's no slouch either, but I do feel like the opponent has the advantage right now. I'm going to play a Snowtrooper Lieutenant, sending Piet in with +2 attack because he is an Imperial unit. When played, you may attack with the unit. If it's an Imperial unit, it gets +2/+0 for this attack, so that's 3 damage to his base. My opponent puts another experience on his TIE. I put an experience on my Snowtrooper Lieutenant. And then the TIE hits the base for 4. I take the initiative. And my opponent is then going to play another TIE. I really do not like seeing this. I am quite worried about the status of the Space Arena in this game, especially because the Death Trooper that I have in hand. So when played, Death Trooper can deal 2 damage to a unit on the enemy side and 2 damage to a unit on your side. But the problem is both of them have to be ground units. So Death Trooper doesn't work as a removal option to get rid of a TIE, which is it's really unfortunate. A lot of removal options can hit units in both arenas, but the Death Trooper cannot, which does make that card a little weaker than it would be if it was unrestricted in its targeting. So I hit the enemy base for 3 with my Snowtrooper Lieutenant. My opponent hits my base for 4 with his TIE. I put a counter on. I put an experience token on Piet, hit his base for 2. He puts an experience token on his TIE, hits my base for 3. I'm then going to play Colonel Yularen, who heals my base for 1, as well as just being another unit. My opponent plays Admiral Mahdi, the 1/1 who, when killed, can ready another friendly unit. Luckily, I've drawn into the ideal card for this situation, Overwhelming Barrage. So with my Snowtrooper Lieutenant at Strength 3, I'm going to be able to play Overwhelming Barrage, give him +2/+2 for the turn, and then I have 5 damage to assign, and I can assign 3 to the 3 life TIE and 2 to the 2 life TIE, wiping out my opponent's Space Arena in one blow here, which I'm really happy about doing because those TIEs were really going to add up. And then I still have the +2/+2 for the phase in case I want to potentially fight with other units later on. So Overwhelming Barrage, really, really strong card. Honestly, one of the strongest cards in the game. My opponent sends in General Veers, 3/3 that gives your other Imperial units +1/+1. Both of us are going to be probably deploying Tarkin this turn, so once again, I want to clear out Imperial units that my opponent has so that Tarkin's ability will be wasted. So my Snowtrooper Lieutenant takes out Veers. Would normally die from this 3 damage, but has +2/+2 until end of turn from Overwhelming Barrage or Bombardment. I forget which one it's called, keeping it in the game. I use Yularen to take down Mahdi so that Mahdi doesn't have a ready target at this time and Tarkin doesn't have a target for the free experience. I'm trying to kind of make it so my opponent will not get value out of those abilities. And my opponent just hits the base with Tarkin. I deploy my Tarkin, and I think I may end up having my Tarkin and my Admiral Piet attack his Tarkin here. I give 1 experience to my Snowtrooper Lieutenant, which will save him from dying when the Overwhelming Barrage wears off. And yeah, and then I think I do actually attack his Tarkin with Piet as well in order to get his Tarkin low on life, such that I can now deploy Agent Callus from hand, ambush him in, and take out the enemy Tarkin with 1 attack. So my opponent does have the initiative here, but I have a way stronger ground arena than my opponent does. Neither of us have presence in space. I'm a little behind on life, but overall, I feel like I have a considerable advantage at this point in the game. My opponent sends in an Emperor's Royal Guard that is a 3-cost 3/4, and it has Sentinel as long as you control an official. Tarkin is an official. As long as you control an official unit, Tarkin is one. I use my 4/4. I use my 4/4 Snowtrooper Lieutenant to trade with the Emperor's Royal Guard. Good deal since I only had 1 life remaining. My opponent attacks my base with Tarkin, inflicting 2 damage. Once again, doesn't have a target for the bonus experience. I use Agent Callus to take down his Tarkin, as I had planned on the previous turn. Playing Agent Callus also heals my base for 1, thanks to Colonel Yularen. And when another unique unit is defeated, you may draw cards. So that's a once per round ability, but having defeated his leader, Tarkin does give me a card. My opponent at this point takes the initiative, and I'm going to swing in for some bonus damage to the base. 2 from Tarkin, 3 from Piet, and then 2 from Yularen. So I now have the advantage in base HP, as well as having a stronger board and card advantage. So this game has been going really well for me. And the main thing that I think could be a big problem is if my opponent manages to get an overwhelming barrage played on me, which could potentially take out multiple units. So he plays here a Snowtrooper Lieutenant with no one to buff. I sense that this means that he may be trying to get a target out for an overwhelming barrage. If he did a barrage for 4, he could kill both Colonel Yularen and Agent Callus with the same card. Alternatively, if he managed to get something more buffed later, he could do even more damage. So I decide I'm going to play the Death Trooper. When played, deal 2 damage to a friendly ground unit and 2 damage to an enemy ground unit. I have the Death Trooper deal 2 damage to itself and 2 damage to the Snowtrooper Lieutenant to clear that off the board and prevent a potential overwhelming barrage with the next play. And I'm just kind of trying to get to have control of the board. We do see a Vanquish come out, killing Agent Callus. That's okay. I'm going to play General Veers, giving all the units that I have on the board right now. They're all Imperials. So they all get +1/+1. My opponent takes the initiative. I play a basic tie. Tarkin hits the enemy base for 3, gives an experience to the tie. Then we have 4 more coming in from Piet with it, thanks to his experience buffs and Veers. And then we have a bit more from Yularen as well. There's not, I think, a lot that's going to stop me at this point. My opponent does play Colonel Yularen, healing the base for 1. And once again, I'm going to remove that to prevent a potential bombardment. Although, honestly, at this point, I don't think it was altogether necessary because the game's pretty over. So I play Count Dooku, who comes in shielded and defeats a unit with 4 or less remaining HP. That means there's no opportunity now for a bombardment. My opponent just takes the initiative, and I will attack with my remaining units and close out the game. So this was an interesting game. I actually felt like I was at a disadvantage at the start when my opponent had that strong start in the space arena, and he shows his hand here and reveals that, yeah, he did actually have the overwhelming barrage. So in this case, I'm not sure how necessary it was to counterplay it, but I was successfully counterplaying that card by clearing those units before he had a chance to hit me with the barrage. So yeah, that was another game with this mirror match. Both of us running Vigilance Tarkin, but our 2 builds are actually fairly different. I'm not sure if he was running Dooku. He was running Mahdi, who I don't. He was running the AT-AT, which I don't use. We had several cards, but not all of them. And yeah, so interesting situation there. And these mirrors have been relatively quick, and we are going to do a third one here. We'll see if I can go 3-0 in the mirror. I look at my hand and don't have a turn 1 play, so that's a quick mulligan decision. I basically always want to have a 1 or 2 cost, and a 1 cost that I can then buff with Tarkin is especially valuable. So this hand I have a Relentless in hand. After the first game, in the first game, it felt like Relentless was kind of the game-winning card for me. And as a result of that, I'm actually going to keep a Relentless in my hand here and try to develop into it and use it to secure the game. That's kind of the tactic that I'm thinking because of how much success I had with it in the first game. Also, the first game went long, and it seems like this one might go long also. We're going to have to see, but I'm holding on to the Relentless even though it's expensive. We'll see if that ends up being a good play. My opponent takes the initiative, missing that turn one play. I'm happy to see that. I play Admiral Piet. Not all that valuable, but 1/4 is a decent stat line. He can scale up with Tarkin's ability, and his ability becomes very relevant later on in the game. I believe I actually drew another Relentless there and resourced it. My opponent sends in the Super Laser Technician. I can play a Snowtrooper Lieutenant here and have Piet hit the base for 3. This is actually the same play that I used in the previous game, with playing the Snowtrooper Lieutenant, having Piet hit the base harder, and then using Tarkin's ability to put an experience on the Snowtrooper Lieutenant, making him a 3/3. That means that the enemy Super Laser Technician is not going to be able to trade with my Lieutenant. My opponent plays another Super Laser Technician. This is not really the situation I most want to see here. My opponent is ramping up faster than me. On the plus side, though, that does mean that the actual units that I'm deploying are substantially stronger. So in this situation, I can play the Emperor's Royal Guard. Another thing that I could do is just kill the Snowtrooper, I said Snowtrooper Lieutenant, the Super Laser Technician, which I end up choosing to do. That means my opponent isn't going to have a chance to buff him with Tarkin, which would then allow him to trade with my Snowtrooper. So I've cleared him without him being able to use the buff. He ends up using the buff on his other Super Laser Technician instead. I play an Emperor's Royal Guard. My opponent deploys Tarkin. I give the Emperor's Royal Guard an experience, and he does have Sentinel because um, Admiral Piet is here. So my opponent then swings into the Royal Guard, only does 2 damage, and takes 4. And then my experienced Snowtrooper Lieutenant hits Tarkin for 3 and defeats him immediately. So I'm pretty happy with that. I was able to defeat my enemy's leader on the turn that he was played. He did get a chance to buff up the Super Laser Technician, but ultimately it was a pretty low impact leader deployment. And now I feel like with my Tarkin being able to deploy to the field this turn, I'm maybe going to be able to get into a pretty advantageous position since his leader's already been cleared. Now, one thing to note is that on this turn, if my opponent has an overwhelming barrage, he could play it here and wipe out all my units, and it would be extremely annoying. Because he already has 2 experience, so he would have strength 4. He would get +2, go to 6. He would then need 3 to kill the Royal Guard, 1 to kill the Snowtrooper, and 2 to kill Piet. So that would be a really strong play. Luckily for me, he doesn't have it and just trades his Super Laser Technician into the Royal Guard instead. So if he had had that play, what I would probably need to do is deploy Tarkin, play the TIE Advanced to buff Tarkin, and then have Tarkin hit the base or something. But he would get a chance to hit Tarkin for 6 damage, which would really be unfortunate. My opponent then plays his 3rd Super Laser Technician, seeing all of those this game, which I'm kind of happy about because these are not very efficient units, but he is going to ramp into stuff like potentially that AT-AT much sooner than I can get my own big hitters online, thanks to all the Super Laser Technicians. My opponent then plays a Cell Block Guard. I'm going to have Tarkin take out the Cell Block Guard, buff my TIE Advanced. Cell Block Guard is just a 3/3 Sentinel. My opponent buffs the Super Laser Technician there. I have some options. I can kill a Super Laser Technician with the Snow Trooper Lieutenant, or I can just start hitting his base. I end up deciding that I am going to trade there. And the reason that I do that is because he could buff again and then threaten to kill Tarkin, and it would be annoying. I would rather just clear the board. Yes, it gives him a resource, but he's going to get that resource readied either way. So at this point, I'm just like, you know what? We're going to clear the board, and we're going to try to maintain board control. Also, clearing the unit means that the opponent does not have the opportunity to play Overwhelming Barrage, which would be an important swing at this point in the game. Well, it's a bit of an odd situation. My opponent has a ton of resources and does have the initiative, but my board is considerably stronger. Um, a Homestead Militia comes out. I clear it with Tarkin and give an experience to my TIE Advanced. TIE Advanced now up to a 5/4, and unfortunately, it's hit by takedown, removing it before it gets a chance to attack. Not what I most wanted to see here. My own hand is mostly kind of reactive cards that would be good against the enemy units, except for Relentless. And so what I end up doing here is actually deploying Callus with no ambush just to develop my board more. This is kind of low value, but it's probably better than wasting the resources because I am trying to like get a strong board going if I can. Here comes the Blizzard Assault AT-AT. And unfortunately for my opponent, I have some strong counters available. So what I'm going to try to do here is set up a maximum firepower right now. Um, by giving the experience token to Callus, I go up to Strength 9, which would allow me to play maximum firepower, choose Callus and Tarkin and deal the damage that I need to kill that AT-AT. But my opponent uses Tarkin's ability to give it an experience, now up to 10/10. Luckily for me, so the maximum firepower would no longer kill it. I could still play maximum firepower and also trade Piet into it. But honestly, I don't even have to do that because I luckily have a copy of Vanquish in hand, which is a straight up kill. Um, I'm going to play Vanquish. This is just defeat a non-leader unit for 5. So that super unit is defeated. And the reason I was hoping to play maximum firepower is I then could have also played my super laser technician on the same turn. By Vanquish one more, so I didn't quite have the resources I needed for that play, which is a little unfortunate for me, but ultimately I consider it to be, it's acceptable. I still got huge value that turn playing a 5 cost card to just defeat a unit that my opponent paid 9 for, 8 for the base unit, and then 1 for the +1/+1. My opponent plays Colonel Yularian. I take him out immediately with Callus, who then draws a card for defeating a unique unit. My opponent then plays another Colonel Yularian. This one I'm actually going to take this Colonel Yularian out with Tarkin, once again counterplaying a potential overwhelming barrage. Tarkin now on only 1 life, but he's been doing a lot of damage and giving out experience counters, so he's been getting a ton of value from me this game. My opponent plays a Cloud City Wingguard, a 2/4 with Sentinel. Not the biggest obstacle for me here. Not the biggest obstacle for me here. There's multiple ways that I could deal with this. I could play an overwhelming barrage. I could play a maximum firepower. I'm sort of thinking about what the best way to resolve this is. I would like to clear this unit. I'm gonna pay 3 for a cell block guard, kind of putting my own sentinel onto the field. My opponent then plays a probe droid as well and gets to see my hand. The Viper probe droid 2 cost 3/2. When this is played, look at an opponent's hand, I believe. And so what I'm gonna do in this situation is I'm gonna counter this with the overwhelming barrage, and I can put that on Tarkin or Callus and get enough damage to kill both of his units there with 1 card. So big value from overwhelming barrage yet again. Really strong card. And my opponent takes the initiative. I hit his base for 3, thanks to Admiral Piet. And I'm going to resource up. My opponent plays a Emperor's Royal Guard. I play out Relentless. My opponent plays another Emperor's Royal Guard. At this point, I actually make a big mistake. So I erroneously thought that his Emperor's Royal Guards had Sentinel. They only had Sentinel if you control an official unit. I'm not sure why I thought that he did, but for whatever reason, I thought that these guys did have Sentinel. So my first attack, I actually trade Tarkin with one of them. That's actually a big misplay. I could win the game this turn if I just ignore those guys, but I erroneously thought they had Sentinel and attacked into it. However, I then realized my mistake, and I'm like, wait a minute, I don't have to attack into them, derp. And I start, I'm sort of criticizing myself for my derpy behavior here, but I do have a strong enough board state that it's not going to be decisive in the game, as my other units are able to attack my opponent's base several times, get it down to just 4 HP. My opponent has the initiative, but the first event that he plays is going to do nothing. And I kind of joke with my opponent about, hey, look at the cards I just drew. Ray Supply and Super Laser Technician arriving a little late. You really want those ramp cards earlier in the game. But yeah, at this point, my opponent plays Vanquish on my Relentless, which does nothing because of my ability, and Relentless attacks the enemy base and defeats it. So that is the game. Another victory in the Tarkin mirror here. So I had a game plan of getting Relentless out, trying to control the board aggressively to prevent my opponent from getting big value out of Overwhelming Barrage. And luckily for me, the one turn where he could have had a devastating overwhelming barrage, he didn't draw it. He could have cleared out my board before I deployed Tarkin, which would have been really annoying, and then also hit Tarkin for a fair chunk of damage with the Technician itself. Luckily for me, that didn't end up being something that he was able to do, and I was able to secure the win. So yeah, there we go. 3 games with the Vigilant Tarkin mirror. And the first 2 we showed off the new Count Dooku a little bit. That was the card that I was kind of interested in playing, and this was the build that I chose to play it in. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys. That's gonna do it for this video, and I'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content. Thanks again, guys. Catch you later.